Anyway, the reader's design for this can be used for those purposes. Anyway, another reason for selecting the sequence was that the layout of the books, at least at the early stages, are very close to a one-to-one relationship between the pictures and the words. Like, for instance, here you have Pap can nap, and it's just got Pap and nap. On prior pages, they would have introduced the characters. Or like Nan and a pan. It's very close to a one-to-one relationship between what's in the picture and what's on the page. It's like the fox example I was talking about earlier. That's very useful. Let's see. Next step was to isolate language elements. So basically, I just made up a big list spreadsheet of all the words and the grammar in the books and split it up. And it was a very disorganized vocabulary list. So what I had to do was take this then in the form of vocabulary groups. I tried to form groups by part of speech and topic, filter out rare, unusual words, and emphasize prototypes. Now prototypes are, like when we think of a word, like if I was to say, think of, what's the first word you think of when I say furniture? Probably words like chair and desk, table, things like that would pop to mind. Those are prototypical words. And they're some of the first words we learn as children, which is why they're some of the first words that pop to our head. So it's easier to teach those kind of words than it is more specific words like ottoman, or more general words like furniture itself. Even just the idea of categorizing is something that happens like maybe in 3rd or 4th grade, I think. Younger children have a really hard time of thinking in terms of categories. Okay, yeah, and so I filtered those words out and go through there. Now, sorry. Now, the point here, the main point in forming these groups, was to form groups of simple vocabulary that they could read phonetically as well. So the fact that they're from the phonics readers is that they can be decoded phonetically is important. And even if they're introduced just communicatively in the pre-reading stages of the program, before they start reading the books, when they finally do start reading, then they're recycling words, they're rediscovering words that they already know how to say. And so this is duplicating, this is recreating what a native speaking child is doing when they're learning synthetic phonics. As they decipher the sound for words, they'll recognize the word by the sound. And say, well, I know this word. I learned this in 2nd grade, or I learned this last year when we were speaking about it. And now it's here on the page, and I know that I can connect this meaning. So it gives you an extra layer of making connections between words and meaning. Now, this is especially useful because it's estimated we need to know about 90% of the words on the page to understand what we've been reading. So if they already have this communicative vocabulary set that they can read on, then that saves us work as we're teaching books because they already have a vocabulary to go off of. And it also makes it less space challenging for them. It makes it easier for them to read it without being discouraged. Now, the list I was able to come up with these words, of course, they had big gaps in them, like certain colors weren't represented in the books, or certain, maybe big would be introduced but little wouldn't, because it's a little bit difficult. So I would fill those gaps out too. So communicatively, it's easier to teach a full lexical set. So you have a nice set of the colors. You want to make sure everything is represented there when you're teaching that. Even if they don't come up in the books later, it makes it easier. And let's see here. Of course, the point here is because because you're teaching those words communicatively in the first initial stages of the program, you wouldn't want to focus on learning the written word at that stage. When you're teaching these communicative words like red, blue, yellow, the lexical sets that we formed, the focus would be on communication. The reason being for that is that if they get into a memorization technique, it's harder to teach them to pay attention to the letters later on. So, of course, why would you bother trying to read every single sound in a word if you already have memorized the block of letters? But unfortunately, I think that creates interference later on when they're running into new words that they don't know. Because the whole point of having a phonics-based approach is that they're able to read words, decode words that they don't know. And so to do that, you would want to leave off introducing the written word until you start through the phonics program proper. Now, the next stage in the curriculum was to try to pace the units in accordance with the student level and scheduling constraints. So this is like the scheduling restraints that we would have in our NESEP program. So I would just look at like how many classes we have per semester for the years, and we'd sort of sketch out a general broad idea like this. The number of lessons per unit that would be focused, per phonics unit in the SPHERIC method I sort of based it on the NESEP program here, but because there's a difference in the teaching methodology, it's impossible to say how long a given unit would have. And I wrote out a sort of synopsis of the curriculum in your handouts too. For the first and second grades, this is sort of what I would come up with. Basically, those lexical groups that we came up with, that are also in your handouts, I think. This would be the order, one possible ordering that I came up with for those. Let's see. Okay. Sorry, just went blank here for a second. Okay, good. So the conversation patterns vary according to complexity. But as the methodology involved in determining sequence and approach vary drastically between NESEP and SPHERIC, then it's impossible to say exactly how many classes per unit would be necessary. So there would have to be flexibility in the system here, at least at first. So program leaders could understand how far kids should get, and teachers wouldn't have to be stressed out about making benchmarks so much as it would also inform teachers and students as to what is effective. And also, of course, class size, teacher experience, all those things go into the pacing of the program. The advantage to the SPHERIC system is because it's in these units, these meaning units, that, for instance, if a teacher wasn't able to get through everything, then the next year's teacher could just continue off from wherever the last teacher was able to get to. And so you don't necessarily have to be here by first grade. You could get here, then the second grade could start from here, and then so the program could be adaptable to the reality of the students' levels and pacing. And as phonics and reading proper don't begin until the third year of our NESEP program, then we can use the first and second grade to focus exclusively on learning these lexical sets, basic conversation techniques, and major features of the language. So first, like in this orientation, what we would teach would be basic words for classroom instruction, structural commands such as sit down, stand up, raise your hand, listen, look, get, put away, start, stop. The basic setup so you can have a structure for your class. And then maybe politeness words like please, thank you, and you're welcome, just to create a sense of discourse with the teacher so you can use English to moderate that. And then once you start that, you can start teaching the lexical sets. And from the sequence of, this is all based on the reading A to Z to COM ones, the sets I came up with that seemed to go best were these ones here. Basically, you have feelings, living things, colors, numbers up to 20, food, play, being able to play, talking about playing, and basic actions, basic adjectives, common items, people, and body parts. Now, this is one possible sequencing of it only. And when I tried to sequence it, I tried to make it so that when you're teaching the new things, you could use the older stuff to recycle the language. Like, at first, there's not a lot you can do, so we just start with feelings, because that's something that's fairly straightforward you can express for the children. And then colors. So that's basically just some isolated sets of vocabulary you're learning. But once you get into animals here, you can start talking about what color animals are what. And you state the numbers, you can start counting how many of which color of animals. And body parts, you can start how many body parts does a thing have, and you can start to recycle all of this information together. We get into common items, of course you can recycle numbers and colors as well. Basic adjectives like, hard, soft, heavy, light, big, little, they can be used for all of these. You can recycle everything through that. And you can go on once again to expand your knowledge of living things and basic things that are salient to a child's environment.